cross that bridge when we get there, I guess. You know, a couple of weeks ago we went back to school for the first day. And it happened to be that day in April when people like to pull pranks. So I got my couple licks in the morning. Going home in the afternoon, we loaded up down there at Van Horn. I usually pull the bus off the side. There's a space there. Give the kids a chance to get seated. I don't like to just drive off, and I got 8 or 10 sitting in the aisle. So I pulled over and gave them their opportunity to sit down. And I'm looking in the mirror, and here's one seat where the two are in the front of it are turned around looking at the back. The two behind that seat are overlooking that away, and there's about 4 or so on the other side. They're all cowering over trying to find out something. And there's nothing visible from my standpoint in that seat. So that tells me there's a fight or something. So I get up, slowly go back. And I reached over like that, and 2 heads looked up at me and said, "April Fools." I had to crack up on that one. And of course the whole bus had a good one with that one. We had quite a time. The kids can have a way of having a lot of fun as long as it's kept within reasonable bounds. Why, it's enjoyable by all. So April Fools was another funny day. My subject this morning is a little bit in line with what we're talking about in the Sabbath school lessons. Well, we just get a double dose. But it's really focused on the 7 seals. The 7 seals of God. They're listed in Revelation. Anyone who chooses can open up. Most of us have studied Revelation, and we know right away what I'm talking about. When Jesus was on the Mount of Olives the last time, he was caught up into the heavens. And as he was being caught up, gradually taken out of the sight of those that were around him, they watched. And he just went up and he was received of a cloud, and that was it. And there was 2 angels, it says, that were there, and apparently they spoke in unison, but they were said, "Why stand ye here gazing up into heaven? This same Jesus, which is taken up from you into heaven, shall come again in like manner as ye see him go into heaven." So they were told that you're going to see him again. He's going to come again. And of course we all know that we are now very close to that very day when that event will take place, isn't it? Jesus also said in Matthew 24 and 29, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven." In the first part of that verse, he makes a statement that should be noted. Is immediately after the tribulation of those days. We all know that he's not talking about the 7 last plagues. That's been proven to us 100 times over. That during that time, children of God are going to be on the sea of glass. They're not going to be, and that'll be a tribulation that will be unmatched in human history, period. There will be nothing compared with that. But the tribulation that Jesus is talking about in this 29th verse is, as was mentioned, not the 7 last plagues, but another kind of a tribulation. We are involved in that tribulation today. Right now, that tribulation is in progress as time marches on towards that great and notable day of the Lord. That tribulation is in the form of the seals. And that brings us down to the 7 seals that are mentioned in Revelation. We turn to Revelation 6 for those seals. I'm not going to quote verse for verse. It's not necessary. Anybody that wants to look can look into them for themselves and see. But we know that Jesus is the only one who can open those seals. And so he proceeds to tear one seal off as he goes. And as he pulls the first one, it records in verses 1 and 2 that there is one on a white horse, and he's going forth to conquer. Verses 3 and 4 speak of the second seal. And the details read as one on a red horse, and peace is gone from the earth. Certainly is gone, isn't it? Let's look around and see where we can find a peaceful condition on this earth today, and I don't think we can even find it anywhere. Some places are a little easier than others. We have it very, very easy here. Probably the most peaceful area in the whole world. But generally speaking, there is no peace in the earth today. And what do we hear? The peace and safety cry, isn't it? What's the goal in the Middle East right now? We want peace. We want to get these two together. They'll never do it. There may be an outward show of it. That'll never happen. We know that, don't we? But that's the cry. And peace is taken from the earth under the second seal. Third seal, verses 5 and 6, shows one on a black horse with balances. You know, you've seen, as I think of balances, those with equality and justice, etc. That may also mean balances for measuring in economic matters. So much for so much. Because it mentions about the purchase of a measure of wheat for a penny. It also mentions famine and hard times. Every evening we can go home during the week, turn the TV set on at 6 o'clock, and from 6 till 7 or whenever we want to watch national news, plenty of hard times visible. I think of Russia right now. Those people, they visit to the grocery store. I sure wouldn't want to relish that. Man waits 3 hours just to pick up 1 or 2 items. I don't know where he finds time to do his work. He has to spend so much time in line waiting for some piece of food or a few groceries so he can go home. These are hard times. Prices going up, what, 40, 60% overnight, and they started to jump. So we find these things also taking place. The fourth seal, verses 7 and 8, is one on a pale horse. He has power over 1/4 of the earth to kill with a sword, with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth, it records. As continuing in verses 9 to 11, we have the fifth seal. This is a little different, for it's like it's going back to a special thing here. And it reveals under the fifth seal those that were slain for the Word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ throughout the time. And it shows that, how long, Lord, are you going to sit and wait? Why don't you avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And it says that white robes were given to these, to every one of them, and it was said that they should rest for a little while, for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren should be killed as they were. Till this should be fulfilled, they should take their rest. This we find under the fifth seal. Now we come to number 6. This is yet to happen. For at no time in history have we recorded the things that are shown here in this 12th verse. For it says, And I behold, when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars of heaven fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely fig when she is shaken of a mighty wind. This is special. This is something of a different nature. It's the end of one time, isn't it? Or the beginning of the end of one age. I would rather put it that way, because the end of it doesn't happen until the final plague has been finished. But you might say that this would be the beginning of the end, because these things just listed match up with what we just mentioned that Jesus spoke in the 24th chapter of Matthew. The sun will be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars of heaven shall fall. The powers of heaven shall be shaken. And when does it take place? Immediately after the tribulation, or these other seals have been poured out. Now the Son of Man appears. We talked a while ago about Kuwait. I never forget, after the war was, I guess, officially declared won, they still had to contend with these smoke from these oil wells. Well, they're doing it today yet. But when it happened, they interviewed somebody and they said, this is more scary than the war itself. This feeling of total darkness in the daytime and in the nighttime and in all the time. And it makes them, I guess if you were superstitious, you could go crazy. But it creates a weird feeling, and a feeling of fear in the people that are there. Because nothing is right as the way it should be. The rhythm, if you will, within the person has been interrupted. And it's a dramatic change. And it's hard to cope with. And it creates a fear, a special kind of fear. And you can't help but think, when these things are so of such a magnitude as they are, this is a prelude to what's coming when Jesus comes. The darkness. And all of a sudden that same kind of a fear that's going to be found at that time. A very small example was Tuesday night this week. We talked about it. The wind was in the house when it started. And I don't think it was the wind that drew me out. I don't know what it was, but I went to the back door and opened it up because I started to see the sky getting kind of dark. And I heard this, as was mentioned, the sound of a freight train. And you know, during the week, I've heard numerous people called by the same thing. And different people say the same thing. It sounded just like a big freight train. It was the wind. And when you stood out and you looked at it, you couldn't help but become a little bit awestruck. I don't care how much faith a person has in the Lord, you look up and you see that, it makes you realize that you are a speck upon a speck in the middle of this universe. And what you are doesn't really mean too much. Because here's a force so great, can't even begin to cope with it. And yet this was nothing. This was just a very small happening, really. Amongst the national news, I doubt if it even ranked very much of a clip on the news. And yet it still was a slight sample of things to come. It creates a fear, just that right there. So these things do point towards that time, don't they? Towards that time when Jesus spoke. Towards that time when the sixth seal will be torn loose and these things will actually begin to take place. Somebody might say, well, that's what I'm going to look for because I want to be ready when the Lord comes. But when that sixth seal has been torn off and that starts to take place, might as well forget it because he's already been dispatched, if you will. He's already on the way. There is no time to prove oneself whether they are faithful or not at that hour because the decision has already been made. A person will have to live with where they're at. And Jesus comes. The thing that happens then is that the saints are reaped, aren't they? This earth is, he comes with the sickle, as it mentions in Revelation 14. And the earth is reaped. The angels are the reapers. So all of those who are God's people around the face of the globe are caught up to meet the Lord in the air. Their residence, of course, will be at the sea, on the sea of glass from the holy city. I like the way the Bible arranges these things because it puts it in a reasonable order that we can make good sense of this series of events. The seals begin in the 6th chapter. They conclude with the coming of the Lord in the final verses. The 7th chapter shows something different. What does it show? It shows where the saints have been reaped and they're on that sea of glass. And it even describes who they are, the 144,000 and also those of the mixed multitude, which would include Abraham and ourselves. And they're on the sea of glass, and what takes place there? For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, it says in verse 17, shall lead them to living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. So when Jesus comes, the saints are caught up, and the marriage supper of the Lamb begins. We dwelt a little on the marriage supper a few weeks ago, didn't we? They're going to escape this real tribulation that comes, this real time of trouble that we have been getting slight previews through the course of our years, and we can see. What happens at this time? Goes right into Revelation chapter 8. The 7th seal is peeled back. The 7th seal is peeled back. And when he had opened the 7th seal, we read in chapter 8, verse 1, there was silence in heaven about the space of a half an hour. We don't know what that half hour is, but it's a short period of time, and it makes no difference how we want to relate it. It's there, and it's going to happen that way. And at that time, I saw the 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given the 7 trumpets. Now we're into something of what we've been studying in Sabbath school, the trumpets. Not the seals, but the trumpets. And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne. And the smoke of the incense which came with the prayers of the saints ascended up before God out of the angel's hands. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from fire of the altar and cast it into the earth. And there were voices, thunderings, and lightnings, and an earthquake. And now we have in verse 6 the 7 angels which had the 7 trumpets prepared themselves to sound. Now things are placed in order. The plagues are going to be poured out. We find the 7 last plagues continuing to be poured out. We find them listed in 2 areas, once under the trumpets and another time under the vial, or yes, the vials. I'm not going into that at the moment, because we all understand that. The 7th plague, which is the last one, is the Battle of Armageddon. That's the time when all nations of the world are gathered together. Where? The Middle East, once again, aren't they? To fight God. That's really who they're trying to fight. They're against Israel, but if you're against Israel as a whole, you're also against God. The 7th plague is defined in Revelation 14, 17 to 20, and also Revelation 19, 11 to 20. I'm not going to read those either. But this is the order of events as they take place. A very simple, easy to follow chronology. We don't know exact things in some areas that's going to take place. We don't know the time when Jesus comes, but we certainly know that we are in that season, don't we? And it's not very far away. We're at the time now of the 7th plague. And I'm going to ask you to entertain some thoughts on Ezekiel 38 and 39. When I first became into the Church of God, I was under the impression Ezekiel 38 and 39 dealt with the Battle of Armageddon. That was the general way it was taught. Over the years, some other thinkings have come along in that area. But as I go over Ezekiel 39, I'm curious once again, why can't it be Armageddon as it reads? And so I looked a little bit at it, and I'd just like to share you some of the thoughts that I came up with on Ezekiel 38 and 39 in relation to it being as the Battle of Armageddon in that final chapter in the times of the Gentiles. Bear in mind, I'm not saying it is, but I merely plan to point out some thoughts that we can think about as we consider this area of prophecy. One of the things that makes it look like it could be at that time is the setting that we find it in relation to the other scriptures around it. Ezekiel 37 is what? It's talking about the dry bones of Israel. We've all heard that story. And that's where Israel is being regathered and built up as a nation. We see that taking place right now over in the Middle East, don't we? 38 and 39 talks about what's going to happen once this little nation appears to be prosperous and making themselves great. And as we go into chapter 40, we're actually into the kingdom, aren't we? Because that's what is following in those verses. So the general area or location, as it is in Ezekiel, could lend itself to be at the time, or at that time of Jesus' coming and the Battle of Armageddon. The force, I'll use it, or the one mentioned here is Gog and Magog. Now this has always stood for Russia and those in the parts of the north. And that's still a very vital power in the world today, even though it is in the bad condition it's in. Supposing in the next few months or in a year or so, something happened and Russia economically was turned around into an about-face and into a successful power once again. Supposing it aligned itself with Catholicism at Rome and became an extension of Rome. Now, there's no question that the Roman influence is working very strong in Eastern Europe. You can still see it in the news broadcasts. Once in a while it's mentioned. And who is in the background pulling the strings? Rome. There's no question about it. The heart of where Babylon is. But we also know that during the time of the plagues, Babylon is going to be destroyed. Babylon has to be destroyed. At the time that Armageddon takes place, it appears to me Babylon will not be there as a force in the world or as a power. The beast that Babylon rode will be there. But Babylon itself, or that wicked woman which sits upon the 7 hills, is not going to be alive and powerful. But Russia may very well be. And all the others that remain. For who is it that it speaks about? In verse 5, well, it goes earlier than that, I guess. Verse 3 of Ezekiel 38, it talks about some that will be there. O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And I'm going to go down to verse 5 where it mentions some others. Persia. And who's Persia today? Iraq. And that area of the world. Now, could it not be that Iraq came on too strong, too fast, and had to be stopped? Because we all know where Iraq had its focus to go to. It was right to Israel. That's where she wants to go. But it may have been too early for her to make her move. The time is not right, and Iraq had to be stopped. Reasonable thinking. And who stopped her? God did. He used the United States forces, maybe so, but he did it. And Iraq was stopped. No more is she a threat to Israel, at least in the immediate future. So we have Persia, Ethiopia. There's Libya, isn't it? Libya is mentioned. With them, all of them with shield and helmet. And here's listed Gomer, we find in verse 6. Who's Gomer? My understanding, Gomer is some of the European countries. Correct me if I'm wrong. And up in that area. And all his bands. The house of Togarmah of the north borders, and all of his bands, and many people with thee. And so we have all these nations that are gathered. And they're coming down to where? To the land of the unwalled villages. There's only one land that's really talking about, and that's Israel. That's where it's all taking place. It mentions that they'll go down and a 6th part will be turned back. I think it mentions in 39 verse 2. And I will turn thee back and leave but a 6th part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts and bring thee upon the mountains of Israel. That's a little confusing in a way when you read that verse. But could it be such that the nations are starting to come down, and God, it says in the earlier verse 22, chapter 38 now, I will plead against him, meaning those of Gog and Magog. I'll plead against him with pestilence and with blood, and I'll rain upon him and upon his bands and many people that are with him, and overflowing rain and great hailstones, fire and brimstone. Thus will I magnify myself and sanctify myself, and I'll be known in the eyes of many nations, and they'll know that I'm the Lord. But these people coming down received what God calls as his pleading through natural forces, but he doesn't destroy them. Possibly they're turned back for a short time, and then, as the 39th chapter goes, they come in for the final assault, if you will. When they ignore his pleadings, and they come in for that final assault, we also have the final destruction, don't we? How long this takes place, we can't accurately say, can we? How long did it take for an army to be built up a few months ago? It didn't take long. We had a huge force there. So we know that today a military force can be moved very quickly and set up and moved back and set up again. These things can happen quite fast. So that shouldn't be any problem. We go on in verse 39, or chapter 39, and it shows the different things that will take place. And at the end, in verse 12, it says, 7 months shall the house of Israel be burying them, that they may cleanse the land. For 7 months they're going to go through and keep cleaning up this dreadful mess that's been left over there by this destruction. Now there are some similarities in verses that I thought was quite interesting, and I'd like to share them with you before we close. Ezekiel 38:21 makes a statement that I will call for a sword against him throughout all my mountains, saith the Lord God. Every man's sword shall be against his brother. Zechariah 14, which definitely is of that same battle, in the 13th verse, has a similar statement. And it shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from the Lord shall be among them, and they shall lay hold every one on the hand of his neighbor. And his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. Very strikingly similar thought in both those places. We know Zechariah 14 deals definitely with the Battle of Armageddon. There's another verse which is similar that I would like to mention, and that's in the 22nd verse of Ezekiel 38. Again, this will be compared with one in Zechariah. And I will plead against him with pestilence and with blood, and I will rain upon him and upon his bands, and upon the many people that are with him, and overflowing rain, and great hailstones, fire and brimstone. And we compare this with the 12th verse, Zechariah 14. And this shall be the plague wherewith the Lord shall smite the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. That's how the Lord is going to deal with those folks, those armies, those people. And there does appear to be a striking similar description here in these couple of areas. There may be others. But these are two that I just happened to come across, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought I'd share those this morning. We could think about that a little bit. But it does seem to appear that this is definitely tied up to, and speaking of, the Armageddon that the world is so scared of. You know, the world doesn't want to talk about it too much. You mentioned about that kind of a thing, and people tend to Well, they may be squeamish, but they don't want to say it, and so they'll turn it off and joke about something else. Or they'll say something else about it. But it's in their minds. It's in the minds of the world, those things that are to come. It definitely ought to be in our minds. And we should be making proper preparations each day. Because we don't know when that seventh seal or that sixth seal is going to be peeled back. And those events will take place. We want to be ready when it does. God bless you.